stimulating your brain with power. Do you date?
The Grey Cat is a neoclassical shred guitarist and violin virtuoso who released 2 albums on Roadrunner Records, Worship Me or Die sometime in 1987, and Beethoven on Speed on September 18, 1990. Her unrelenting and abrasive persona and BDSM imagery have been etched into the memories of many a metalhead of the late 1980s and early 1990s, but since then she appears to have slipped into obscurity. Or has she?
You ready? Call of Duty Ghosts, out now, at Tesco.
Yep, that's the Great Cat's guitar and violin work you can hear, and that's her shtick, bridging the gap between heavy metal music and classical music.
What I am doing is simply taking classical music, just in case you didn't know, classical music, resurrecting it into the 21st century using metal. I am taking Beethoven and bringing it through the common music of the masses. The classical music of the past is dead. What will this do for the future of this world? It's gonna wake people up, stop your drugs, stop your drinking, stop your smoking, get into the 21st century with power, with excitement, with brilliance, and with anger and viciousness.
So that footage was taken about 30 years ago. So how did we get from
That's totally powerful music.
to this?
Wow! Wunderbar! Ausgezeichnet! Schmeckt gut! Beethoven rolls! The Great Cat rolls! Shred on! Auf Wiedersehen!
Actually, I guess they're not worlds apart. Catherine Thomas was born in Swindon in the UK on the 6th of June 1966. She won a scholarship from the prestigious music school Juilliard in New York City. In fact, let's give Kat the floor here and she can fill us in on her musical background.
All right, let me just tell you what for the idiots out there that don't know the Great Cat's pedigree background. Okay, I studied since I was 7 years old classical music. I went to Juilliard. I was a concertmaster at Juilliard. I'm a violin virtuoso. I won Artists International on violin. I played at Carnegie Recital Hall as a violin soloist. All right, I toured all over the world. I played for Mayor Ed Koch in New York as a violin soloist. I played for Governor in Mexico as a violin soloist. Steve Allen, the famous comedian, he wrote a piece for the Great Cat, for Catherine Thomas, called Sonatina, all right, which I performed in England. Timothy Leary, the famous drug anti-culture drug guru, okay, we collaborated on a piece called Right Brain Lover. So that's the whole classical genius that I went through. Theory, I won a Robert Hofstadter Award at Juilliard for theory, and then I discovered, after I decided that classical music was dead, I discovered heavy metal, all right? Then that's where the Great Cat goddess, metal goddess, comes in.
So musically, she's good stock. The verdict seems to be that Judas Priest is what turned her onto metal in the first place. Tom Von Doom, who would later join Cat's band as bass player, fills me in on his perspective.
She was more disillusioned with the world of classical music. She was a soloist.
Yeah.
And she wanted to play, violin solos with orchestras. At that time, there were no positions available for female violin virtuosos.
Yeah.
It was all guys playing the solos in orchestras. And she couldn't break in. And, she was certainly good enough. It was definitely, gender-based.
Yeah.
And she did hear, Judas Priest one day and was like, what is that? That sounds like opera. And she started to explore it. And she's like, this is my way into the music world. I'm going to do this new thing.
I guess one question which you might not know is, between discovering metal and forming the band, how long had she actually been playing guitar? It'd be interesting to know how transferable the violin skills are to guitar.
Not as long as you would think.
Mm.
When I joined the band, she'd been playing 3 years.
Jesus.
Maybe?
What?
Yeah.
Man, that's crazy. That's in my head canon anyway.
Yeah, you should have heard her practice violin.
Mm.
Like, she'd practice guitar all the time, but when she broke out her violin, I was just like, oh my God, so amazing. I was always in awe of her ability.
So after Kat formed the band, she quickly completed her first demo EP called Satan Says. She then set out looking for a photographer to help her complete the cover art for the album.
It started on a very busy day when I spent an afternoon taking pictures of, what's his name? Steve Winwood. So I came home from that kind of stressed because that evening, Yoko Ono, who is one of my main clients and good friends, was playing at the Beacon Theater in New York. She had been doing a series of tours. We'd been in Europe. And this was like the big New York show, and it was that night.
Okay.
And I come home from that, and I got to switch my cameras and get up to the Beacon, and the phone rings, and I pick it up, and there's this voice yelling at me, like yelling to the point where you hold the phone away, and like a foot away from your ear. Like, what the fuck? Who is this? She's screaming like, Cream Magazine told me to call you up. You're a photographer. I'm like, yeah, I'm a photographer. What do you know about heavy metal? I'm like, I don't know. Out of the blue, I'm like, I took pictures of Alice Cooper and Kiss. I remember I told her, what have you done lately? I said, whoa, okay. I said, well, I did Stevie Winwood this afternoon. I'm doing Yoko Ono tonight. What do you want? And she said, well, my name's Great Cat. I want something really cat-like, really obnoxious. I said, obnoxious? I said, our cat used to eat raw meat. You want something like that? She said, yeah, great. I was like, oh, okay. Let's see how this goes. And then the day she came, I don't think I had met her actually, but I knew we wanted to do something with a cat eating raw meat.
Right.
And I took it a little further because I live in a West Village, which now is all gentrified, but back then, 30 years ago, it was still very much the meat market, which means at 4 o'clock in the morning, these giant trucks came in with sides of beef. Butchers would chop them all up, and then by noon they were gone. But at 11 o'clock or 12, there was these big garbage cans out front that literally had bones, like, cow leg bones that were like this big, like prehistoric kind of bones. So I went up there and I just kind of nabbed a few. I remember the guy yelling at me, and I was running down the street carrying these 2 giant bones. And I went to the grocery store, got some raw liver, because that's what our cat used to eat. She came over, we talked about, she loved the idea, she loved the bones, which was probably, really contagious with God knows what, like, but that's why they don't let you just take them away, and I think I had an old rug that was falling apart, like a throw rug, like it was a kind of a sheepskin.
Right. Okay.
And I really just picked it up and pulled, and it came in half, and we kind of taped that or glue, pinned that to her bra, so she had this like caveman look, cave girl. So it was pretty heavy duty, and so we took a bunch of pictures of her like that, eating the raw meat. And it's a great picture. I think it's the cover of the album, right?
Yeah.
And she liked that so much, so that's kind of started the relationship because it worked out so well.
The product of this effort you can see on the screen in front of you now. The Satan Says demo would be self-released by Kat on her own label, Death Records Inc., and would somehow find its way into the hands of Steve Ricardo, who was working at Enigma Records at the time and would eventually sign the band to Roadrunner Records.
When I was in California, find a 3-song tape from the Great Cat that was in a pile of tapes that someone sent. And I just sent a postcard and said, I don't always, I wasn't into the rejection postcards, but they made us send them. I sent one up and I said, this is really interesting. Keep in touch. I swear to God, 2 weeks later, I'm in my office. The receptionist is like, Steve, there's someone here to see you. I go in the lobby and there's 3 people there covered in leather and chains. And this chick jumps up and goes, I'm the Great Cat. And I'm like, you came to California? I'm like, she goes, no, we came to see you. You're the only guy that liked our tape. And I was like, okay. So we went out to lunch, and you know what? I bought into it, man. And I went to Case and I said, Case, this is really interesting. Hey, I know they made money off the Gray Cat. And he said, sign her. And I think it was like 10 grand or something. And we made, we signed the Gray Cat. We had a great party. Holly put the party together, and everyone in the whole New York metal scene was there. And Bob Gruen was there. Even people like Monty Connor, who ended up working for Roadrunner, was there. People like that. Don Kay, I don't know if you know him. There was all these
Kerrang.
Mike Schnapp, all these New York metal dudes were all there. And Cat was like just driving everybody nuts. But Bob Gruen took all these great photos of us. The great Bob Gruen, one of the great rock photographers. And nobody liked her. It was like they couldn't stand her. She just was like, worship me and die. And she'd get on the phone and scream at people. And I just thought it was funny. And Holly did too.
And was she the first signing for the US office?
She was my first signing.
I admire that. But Case must have seen something in her, because he's an opera guy, right?
Oh yeah, Case let me sign her. When I told him he gave me the thumbs up right away. That's one thing I will say about Case, is he saw what I saw. She's a star. I'm not going to say star potential. I'm going to say she is a star. Whether she sold enough records to be called a star or not doesn't really matter, because she is a star. She should have been a lot bigger.
With their new relationship with an up-and-coming indie label established, Cat and the band took to the studio to begin production of their first full-length LP, Worship Me or Die. Carrot Fay, who produced Megadeth's debut, Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good, would produce Worship Me or Die for about 2 days before the job went to Kurt Shaw.
We had 2 floors, so the studio's on the first floor, or the second floor. My office were on the first floor.
Right.
And I heard from my partner who was engineering it. He said, "Oh, Wayne, there's, you wouldn't believe it was a big blow up." And then she just came downstairs and just, Kurt, you're a musician. I can't stand these fucking producers who don't know how to, don't know music. Will you produce me? Right. So I said, on one condition, and I was really strict about it. I said, there will be no, there will be, I am not a person that you say fuck you to. I'm from Philadelphia. We boot Santa Claus, So, I won't tolerate it. I won't tolerate it at all. We're there to do work. We're there to make great music.
Yeah.
As long as you have that attitude, I'll produce it. But if you go off on one time, fuck you. And I was right in her face.
Yeah.
And she respected it.
It's either you're on the Cat bandwagon or you're not. Carrot was a character. He he may have done a good job producing the record or not. I don't know about that. He was a party guy. We hung out drinking and partying more than talking about what kind of recording mics we were going to use.
The interesting thing about Cat on this record is that once you understand her musical background, it kind of puts her style of guitar and her style of shredding into perspective.
Everything was charted out, so that's just never done. I mean, we had a lot of metal bands and speed metal acts. They didn't chart anything. It was just all rehearsed. They just knew their parts. Most of them, I would say half of them couldn't read music. But she's Juilliard.
Came from a completely different mindset.
Yeah, completely. I mean, basically using the axe, instead of a violin, it was a guitar, and she played it like a violinist. And believe me, violinists. I'll tell you that this is the interesting thing. Like, I've produced a lot of pop records too, and I would bring in string players. And I just tell you a little story. So if you're doing orchestration and you bring in horn players and string players, this is absolutely true. I bet you talk to any producer, they'll say the same thing. Horn players, they're really spitting, right? They're spitting into their instrument.
Yeah.
And they're usually guys, it doesn't matter, guys win, but mostly usually guys. And they're cool. They're just, they're loose. They're just string players, men or women. Like, there's the funniest thing, like you give them the chart and they'll go And I've used the Philadelphia Orchestra people, you know, which is very good orchestra. They'll play it, and they'll say, they'll look at each other and say, "How did you do?" "Yeah, that was great." "Okay, that was great. We're finished." And you say, "No, they're not." You know, they are finicky. They're just a totally different breed of kind of character, you know, and you have to say, you know, you have to, unless they're session players, and actually these people were session players. They just think it's weird. It's weird. So she's a string player who plays guitar. And then she adds all that grit into with her personality, all that rock hard grit, you know, like everything about her. Very unique.
She was intense. So our fans, she actually started getting fans, and then the fans were called Slaves.
Yep.
I think the first album was Worship Me or Die.
Correct. Yep.
And she would sit there in the photo session actually screaming, "Die, die." You know, that's how we got these pictures. Die.
Worship Me or Die would come out in 1987 on Roadrunner's operating body, Road Racer Records. It's worth a listen. It's not quite the neoclassical shred takes that she'd become known for. It's probably easier to describe what this album isn't rather than what this album is. It's certainly fast, it's certainly particularly brutal, it's not necessarily thrash, it doesn't quite step into any sort of death and grindcore realms, but it's a solid foundation on what Kat would eventually become known for. Her unrelenting persistence on being worshipped, and her perhaps overly aggressive social disposition.
And the thing was, we got along for some reason. I understood who she was, and that she was no different from a lot of loud, obnoxious guys.
Yeah.
But the people didn't accept that from a small, pretty girl.
Yeah, there is what I'm going to cautiously refer to as an empowerment angle from Kat at this time. We can see it on the album sleeves, we can see it on the BDSM Dom persona, we can see it in all her interviews and TV appearances. But check out this clip from the trash TV program, The Morton Downey Jr. Show. It's a fucking hoot.
All right, let me go to our loudmouth here. We've got Kat, all right? Here's Kat.
Take it easy.
Kat, wait a second. Let us talk here for a second.
Shut up.
I've turned on MTV a number of times, and I really only see two kinds of women on MTV. Young blondes and virginal boots, all right?
Let's see your boots, Mort. Red socks.
I'm not a young blonde, baby. And I'm not a virgin, but neither are you, either one.
Yeah, but you know what you are. Hey, you know what you are. I want to tell you.
Usually they have.
Junior, I hate to tell you, you're chain smoking in my face, and you're gonna get cancer. And please, don't. I'll tell you something, Mort. You know, Mort. You know, Mort. This shows your total. Shut up. This total shows your total insecurity of females and everything, because you have to be sucking on a cigarette. It's amazing to me. You don't have your own to suck on.
Come back here.
Hey, come back here. Hey, I had to say something. Come back here and suck my.
And I'll guarantee you she has one. That I can understand this lady is fighting against. Get her ass out of here. We'll be back in a minute.
Anyway, I mean, this could have been a label move. Just throw her into the volley of fire and place her as the antagonist for good publicity. But here's the interesting thing for me. She's not playing up to any particular role. She's not attacking the show for its attitude to metal or whatever the PMRC was doing at the time, which I think is what that show is about. She goes straight for the gullet and calls a petulant chauvinist and an insecure man-child for thinking women with autonomy are some kind of pariah to be feared. So, The Great Kat, social justice martyr? Maybe. After Worship or Die came out, the band tried to get on the road, but was faced with a number of obstacles.
Well, by the time we did the music video, there was a different drummer.
Okay.
So the drummer in the music video is not Adam Killa. It's a different guy named Rob Banks.
Yeah.
Who was a great drummer, but again, didn't last that long.
Right.
Lasted long enough to make the music video and then went off to greener pastures. So we were talking about putting a tour together, but we just couldn't keep a drummer in the band. And I had made friends with one of the guys who auditioned for the band but didn't make the band. A guy named Todd, and Todd and I just got to be friends, and we started playing together. And I had another friend who was a great guitar player who I later went on to play in several bands with. And we just started rehearsing together, and Kat heard about it. And she was disapproving. She's like, "You can't play with other people." I'm like, "Of course I can. What are you talking about?" She was like, if you don't stop playing with those people, you're out of the band. I'm like, "I'm out of the band." Click.
Oh dear.
That was it. It's like, if we're not going to play, there's no band to be in. Like there was no drummer, there were no rehearsals. There were no solid dates. So at that point, I was like, I'm looking for my next gig.
Yeah.
From this point, I've got a blind spot. However, 3 years later, Kat's follow-up album, Beethoven on Speed, goes into production. By this point, Roadrunner themselves have had some changes in staff. This is an account of the recording of the album lifted from the Facebook page of Monty Connor. In early 1990, Roadrunner's owner asked me to take over A&R for The Great Kat, who was signed before I joined the label. He wanted me to simply make things work between the uncontrollable artist and the label, and oversee the making of her second album. Being still fairly new there and eager to please, I accepted the daunting challenge and dove right in. At the time, Kat kept describing her music to the press as Beethoven on speed, so the first thing I told her was, okay, then make the music that backs that up, and start by doing a speed metal cover of Beethoven's famous Symphony No. 5. After hearing her insane arrangement, I had even the better idea of also having her do a groove thrash version, and that is how the Beethoven Mosh came about. Now we were onto something, and the rest of the album became a combo of originals and other classical covers as picked by Kat. Korsakov's Fly to the Bumblebee, Chopin's Funeral March, and Paganini's Caprice No. 24. It's the formula she still uses to this day. I was at practically every minute of every recording session, and in the end it was decided by Kat that we would both get a co-production credit with the producer/engineer John Matthias. It's the only time in my career that I actually played a hands-on producer role. John was not pleased about sharing the credit with us, but by the end of the sessions he was a totally broken man, like all men before him. There was not a person alive who could control Kat. She only listened to her mother, who she would often stick me on the phone with for backup during our many intense battles. Her mum was totally cool with me. She could sense I cared and I was only doing what I felt was best for Kat and the album. Kat concurred with Monty on an email interview I had with her. Incidentally, what you're seeing on the screen is as it was written. The Great Kat and Monty Connor went to the House of Music recording studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and began recording this new masterpiece. Monty was at the recording the entire time, adding speed metal suggestions and dealing with the engineers that would inevitably collapse under the stress of working with the genius of the Great Kat High Priestess of Guitar Shred. The Great Kat ended up once again producing and dominating the entire productions, with Monty and John Matthias as co-producers. Who else but the Great Kat would be capable of producing classical genius music? It seems that directing Kat to adopt the classical virtuoso approach had a profound effect. The album itself is divided into opuses, and is far more distinct from Worship Me or Die, in that it's way more diverse. It feels like Kat's found the proverbial angle on this record, and in a way it helps contextualize Kat's style of shred that we heard on Worship Me or Die. Beethoven on Speed was released on September 18, 1990, and was followed by eclectic TV appearances.
Yeah, and don't ever get to feminine. The Great Cat is God. The music of the 21st century. Beethoven on Speed. Get it. You.
Energetic live shows. And abrasive self-promotion.
Juilliard's Orchestra, huh? Yeah, right. Are you aware of the Great Cat? Have you been enlightened to the music of the future? Cat, Beethoven on Speed. Why don't you wake up and get into the 21st century with Beethoven on Speed? Hello?
You're persistent, aren't you?
That's right. If you don't jam it down their throats, they won't wake up. Wake up, New York!
But Cat's time with Roadrunner didn't last.
Because of her personality. Because people couldn't deal with her. They didn't like the way she acted. She's like she would literally tell everyone, worship me or die. You know, that was her thing. You know, she would just be in your face screaming. And we tried to mellow her out, but forget it. There was no way.
When I asked her how her relationship with Roadrunner ended, she replied, "After they did nothing to further the genius of the Great Cat, I decided to get off the contract and take matters into my own hands. I started my own record label, TPR Music, and quickly began releasing masterpiece albums on my own TPR Music label. Guitar Goddess CD, Bloody Vivaldi CD, Wagner's War CD, Beethoven Shreds, and much more. Listen to these masterpieces now on Spotify," etc. You can see it all on the screen. So that's the Roadrunner era covered. So what's she been doing since then? Here's a brief synopsis. In 1996, she teamed up with an IT company, Cybersoft, I believe, to produce a CD-ROM interactive album, Digital Beethoven on Cyberspeed. It's pretty cool, actually, especially if you're in any way nostalgic for that old Encarta encyclopedia aesthetic. She's actually selling autographed copies of this. I'll put the links below. So this is where I tell you something you already knew. The cat isn't fucking dumb. Check out this interview she did with Reality Check TV in 1994.
Let me tell you something. 10 years ago, no one even knew what a PC was, a home computer. Now, millions of people have PCs. Within the next couple of years, everybody will have CD-ROMs. Everybody will be online. As a matter of fact, I'm getting a website. Do you know what a website is?
I've heard of it. Where you can interact with all of the
So you get into it, you click on the computer, and you can call up thegreatcat.com. And then you can go in there and download some of these cool graphics and WAV files. This is what the future is. Cat Shopping Channel. Move that thing over. Cat Shopping Channel.
Some bows. And ladies, for those of you wishing to keep the man at home, a whip. This item is going extremely fast, so I would suggest you call him immediately.
Wagner's War came out in 2002, featuring, as you might expect it, Flight of the Valkyries. The album seems to be a reaction to 9/11, according to an interview with Todd Skaggs. And by the way, I want to be completely clear on this observation. She's been communicating in the exact same way for 35 fucking years. She's not relented in one interview, one TV appearance, one article posted. It's been relentless, non-stop, forever. Coming through to more modern times, Beethoven Shreds came out in 2011, featuring another mix of originals and more Beethoven metal arrangements. And as recent as 2020, she's been continuing her mission to bridge the gap between classical music and metal. To sum it all up, I'll again take the words of her later Roadrunner A&R man, Monty Connor. You may joke or sneer about all of this, as Kat is not taken very seriously by the metal community, but two things I can tell you for sure is that she definitely is a total genius guitar player, and none of what you see from her is an act or shtick. I spent months on end with her and never saw her once out of character, which is why I say it's no act. The Kat you see is the real Kat, and she is still the same exact person today, obsessively unwavering in her mission, even with very little success to show for it. It's hard not to admire her utter dedication and tenacity. So what are we to make of the great Kat? Well, I can tell you that when I was learning guitar as a kid, I was looking for some way to get into classical music. But since there are just so many composers and so much music under that banner, there wasn't anything that could really hook me in. If I had known about Kat in this time, there's a real chance I could have found what I was looking for. I mean, just to be clear, this is what I wanted. And this is what I got. And man, there's nothing wrong with Malmsteen. It's virtuosity in one instrument at the expense of everything else that's going on in the song and on the stage, and that's completely fine if you're more of a technical guitar person. But if you want to get into classical through Malmsteen, there's a step missing, and that's where Kat should have been. When she sticks to her mission statement and delivers through-line classical arrangements for metal, she fucking delivers. But here's my issue. She delivers, but she doesn't deliver in spades. It appears that she rarely opts to record a full album, instead churning out a couple of minutes of music, then throws it straight onto Spotify with an accompanying video. In 2020 alone, she's put out 15 releases, but only 4 go over 2 minutes long. Dude, I even asked her why her Roadrunner albums aren't on Spotify, because I couldn't find them anywhere. And then she just linked me straight to them. It turns out she's got 2 fucking Spotify artist accounts. It's all over the place. Her website is a similar story. She's trying to host a 35-year career on like the old Space Jam HTML website. I personally can't make heads or tails with what's going on with Kat based on the website. I can't tell if she's pushing something that came out yesterday or something that was 25 years ago. But, as I've already mentioned, she's not dumb and she's not insane or anything like that. I mean, we live in a post-Liam Gallagher world, meaning we can allow artists to be absolute as long as they're delivering the goods. And as I said, the great Kat does deliver the goods, but she delivers the goods in a disintegrated cardboard box with oil stains and no return address. That's the problem. I actually regret my interview with her. I was playing the History of Roadrunner Records angle, when I'm actually more curious as to whether she could play Paganini's Caprice No. 5, or whether she can cram all 6 Brandenburg concertos into 25 minutes. I'd also ask why she's not on the list of notable alumni from the Juilliard School Wiki. So in summary, Kat's worth your time because she's your jumping off point for classical music and metal. But Kat, listen up. Hire a grad student to tidy up your website, tidy up your Spotify pages, and get to fucking work reducing the Brandenburg concertos into 25 minutes. And I don't want you to cut them down. I want the whole thing. Everything. Just faster. Good luck. I'll see you in a month.
We stayed friends too, you know, we still to this day, we communicate, you know. I try not to talk on the phone with her.
I like the album cover. It's so intense.
Yeah.
I gave a CD to my son, who was about 8 at the time. I think, no, probably about 10, and he brought it to school. And I hadn't even looked at it other than the pictures. I don't listen to that kind of music really. And he got in trouble because one of the songs has a lyric about kill your parents.
Yep.
I didn't know that. And so I had to apologize profusely, you know.
No, did you know of the Great Kat?
That little shit. Yeah, sure. I met her 5 seconds in my life. The little shit came up to me. She said, "Well, I'm not on the cover of your magazine." I said, "Because you're not good enough." And that was the end of the conversation.
Oh, a great story. It was at the CMJ Metal Convention, and she started going at it with Mustaine, Dave Mustaine.
Oh,
and,
gold.
He was fucked up, and she's not a drinker. She's just like relentless. She practically made him cry. He wanted to fight her. People were holding him back. to me, it was the greatest thing ever. I'm like, how come every writer here is not talking about the fact that the Great Kat made Dave Mustaine cry? You know, I mean, it was like, that was an epic moment.